Hi everyone, welcome back to my Consultants Explorer channel. I'm Charlie and I'm here to help you explore the early career years of technology consulting, help you to be successful at it and show you how to make the most of the opportunities that it can open up for you. I spent 8.5 years at Accenture building the most incredible launchpad for my own career, and now that I'm starting and running my own businesses, I get to choose what I work on whenever and wherever I want to in the world. And that is the kind of freedom that I can help you find in your journey, which starts just as mine did in technology consulting. So one of the questions that I wondered about for a long time was, how are you supposed to manage specialists if you're not a specialist yourself? How could specialists ever look up to their manager if that manager could actually never do the job that they do? The thing about management is, the more you go up the ladder, the more generalised you have to become, and the more different specialists that you'll have reporting into you, both directly and indirectly. So as a generalist, you have to learn how to manage specialists. It's a similar question to one of the chapters in Ben Horowitz's book, The Hard Thing About Hard Things, which talks about how to hire an expert at something that you're not an expert at yourself. Because if you don't know enough about what they do and how they do it, then how are you going to know that they are the expert that you should hire or not? I've had some great experience in consulting, managing people who were absolutely brilliant at what they did, without my ever having done what they were doing. So this video is based on that experience. Like most other fresh managers, when I first started to manage people, I was managing people who were doing the job that I had already been doing. Specifically, I was a BA team lead, managing a team of BAs. And I had already been a BA, so I knew how to do a good job as a BA, and I knew how to ensure that my team were doing a good job as BAs. In that BA team lead role, it was very straightforward because I could manage people by just knowing what they should do and how they should do it. I could coach on the skills of the trade. Effectively, I was a specialist managing other specialists. But then as I grew more senior, I had the responsibility of managing other specialists like UX designers and solution architects, whose roles I'd never had before. The further up the management chain you go, the more specialists and generalists you ultimately have reporting into you. When you manage roles that you've never performed before, it becomes a very different management scenario to when you're managing an entirely known entity. But in actual fact, your management relationship in both scenarios should not be much different. It's actually the case that when you're managing specialists whose roles you've not had before, you become a better all-round manager, including for the roles that you have had before. So, how is it that a generalist should manage specialists? Here's what I learned in my experience. The number one rule is, recognise that you're not supposed to know the specialist stuff, and instead know exactly what you're supposed to do and be as someone's manager. I said this in my other video on generalists versus specialists, but I want to repeat it again here. As a manager, you're not like the captain of a sports team who is made captain because they're the best at the job. You're more like the team coach, who may never have played the sport before, but who can direct from the sidelines exactly how that team can play together best. As a manager, just like as a sports coach, it is not your job to play well, but to make sure that your team performs the best it possibly can together. It's your responsibility to ensure that every individual on that team performs optimally, and that the sum of all the individuals within the team is greater than its parts. The higher performing your team is, the better a manager you are, and that is to say that the better that each of your direct reports are at their job, the better it reflects on you as their manager. Now, in the scenario where you've never had the role that your direct report is performing, there are a couple of things that I believe can help you to feel and be useful as their manager. The first thing is to recognise the things that you do that they don't and that they're not supposed to do. When I was a project manager managing BAs, UXs, architects and others, it helped me to recognise the things about my role that they didn't do and didn't want to do. I owned people management, I owned accountability and status reporting and client stakeholder management in ways that they didn't. I was responsible for mitigating risks wherever they came up. In summary, I was a crutch. I provided air cover that reduced stress and I helped them to break through barriers. And when your team respects what you do as their manager, and you respect what they do as your specialist, then you have a mutually credible and beneficial relationship. The second thing is, don't be afraid to lean on your specialists where you need it. Your seniors don't expect you to have the knowledge that all of your specialist team members have instead. So if there is a requirement for specialist knowledge to be presented, for example, then bring in your specialist to help present it. Much better that than effectively stealing their work and doing a worse job of presenting it yourself. If there's a requirement for specialist knowledge to attend a meeting or a workshop, then bring your specialist in and encourage them to fly. In summary, don't be afraid to lean on your team members. They will enjoy the opportunity to showcase their skill set, and you will not only learn from them as they do it, but you will also benefit from having a fully engaged and inspired team. Okay, number 2, have one-to-ones. Put regular time in the diary with each of your direct reports so that you can catch up, even when you don't think it's necessary. It's really easy to shy away from spending time with a specialist whose job you don't quite understand yet. But that's exactly why you should spend that time together, so that you can both familiarise yourselves with your respective responsibilities and expectations. You can ensure that they know how you can help them, how you might be able to make connections or open doors or help them mitigate escalations. And in return, they can brief you on what they do and exactly how they do it. Running regular one-to-ones creates an environment of trust, which is a prerequisite to information. If your specialist trusts that you will have their back in case of an issue, then they will share with you if something is wrong, and they will want to explain to you the details that you need in order to help them fix it. You can also use one-to-ones to do your job more effectively as a manager. In this private environment, you can ask your specialist whether they're feeling happy and productive, or whether anything is holding them back. You both have the space to air feelings and to clarify misunderstandings and to agree the best way to move forward. So, running regular one-to-ones with every member of your team, both the specialists and the generalists, can be a highly effective form of management by building the right kind of professional working relationships. Okay, rule number 3. Assure the outputs. The key difference between managing someone whose job you can do and managing someone whose job you can't do is that with someone whose job you can't do, you can't specify how they should do it. So instead, you have to specify what the objectives and the goals are that they need to achieve, and not specify how they should do it. And actually, this is the best way to manage someone whose job you can do anyway. In other words, it's about speaking the language of the project and not speaking the language of the specialism. You should agree with every single one of your team members the milestones they need to achieve and by when. They should know for what their outputs will be used and by who. And they should be aware of any quality controls that will be in place. And then it's up to each and every individual to do their work in the best way that they know how, asking for help from the right people as and when they need it. This can feel a little unnerving as a manager if you're not used to the feeling. You have to trust your team to achieve their objectives without necessarily knowing exactly how they're going to do it. And it's on your shoulders if they don't achieve those objectives. So how can you ensure every single day that your team is on track so that overall you know that you're not going to fail on your own objectives? There are a few techniques here that I found worked really well. One way is to make sure that your team members' customers are happy. i.e., do the people who are going to use your team members' outputs have the confidence that they're going to get them and in the format that they need? And equally, are your team members getting the inputs that they need from the people that they're dependent on? Another way is to ask your team members to write down their plan and then walk you through it so that they can explain how they're intending to meet their objectives. And then you can all track progress against those plans moving forwards. And the final way is to identify a senior specialist who you trust and instate them as a quality control. They can help your specialist by reviewing their output and coaching them on anything they need to improve on. If the expectation is set up front that this person is there to help, then your team members will want their involvement and will not resent it. One final note on assuring the outputs. It's hard sometimes not to be biased towards the content you feel most comfortable with across your team of various specialists. For example, I could coach my BAs much better than my UX designers when it comes to specialist content knowledge. So I could spend more time with the BAs, giving them better feedback and more help. But that's not necessarily fair to the UX designers, and it's also not necessarily needed by the BAs. So as a generalist managing a team of different specialists, it's important to stay focused on project milestones, goals and objectives, and to remain balanced in your approach, managing your individual team members according to their individual needs. You should always make a conscious effort to understand at a high level the specialist content knowledge that you are less comfortable with, so that you can be as effective a manager as possible. Okay, final rule. Rule number 4. Coach only where you can. We touched on this in rule 3, but there are a couple more angles to consider. First, you actually might be able to coach a specialist whose job you've never done before on the content of their job, if you've had another specialist in that same field work for you before and you knew what they did. For example, if your current specialist is really struggling to see a way through, then you might be able to explain to them exactly what your previous specialist did in that situation. And secondly, it might be that your specialist needs help from you on something that you have done before. Like if they're hiring another specialist onto their team to help with workload, then perhaps you'd be able to coach them on interview and management techniques. So those are the 4 rules that I learned about managing specialists when you're a generalist, and actually they apply just as much to managing generalists too. As a manager, I believe you should be very clear on your own responsibilities and where you add value. You should foster the right management relationships with each of your direct reports. You should have a relentless focus on project goals and objectives. And you should help your team to be as successful as possible at what they do, coaching only where you can genuinely be helpful. So I hope this video has been useful for you. If it has, then let me know by clicking the like button. And if you'd like to see what I post next, then definitely subscribe to my channel. Social media links are below if you'd like those. And if you have any questions or comments, then feel free to use the comments section below and I will do my best to answer absolutely everything. In the meantime, thank you so much for listening. I hope you have a great day and I wish you all the best with your exploring.